Hi, I'm Wendy from shinyhappyworld.com, and today we're going to start garment sewing. The first thing that I'm going to show you is how to finish the seam allowances on the inside of the garment. If you just sew that seam and leave those raw edges, when you wash it the first time, you're going to end up with a mass of snarly threads in there. It's going to be very uncomfortable to wear because the threads are going to be tickly, and it also is going to make your garment not last very long. There's a lot of different ways to finish those seams, from really simple to some really fancy, nice finishes. And we're going to go over several of those techniques over the next few weeks. What I'm going to show you today are two of the easiest, simplest, and fastest way to finish those seam allowances. So this is a finished seam. I did it in the same color, so it's a little tough to see, but I'm going to do the rest in a contrasting color. So you can see the stitching line there, and I used a 1/2 inch seam allowance. What I'm going to do for this technique is trim it first, and I'm laying the 1/4 inch marking right on top of that line of stitching, and then I'm going to slice that extra off. So now I have just a 1/4 inch seam allowance there, and we're going to take it over to the sewing machine. Okay, I've got it in the machine now, and I've set my machine on just a standard zigzag. I'm not changing the length or the width at all. And what I'm going to do is do some zigzag stitches so that the needle, when it comes over to this side, is running right off the edge of the fabric. This is the closest thing you can get to a serged or an overlock edge. Now, as it's going right off the edge. I'll pull that out and let you see it. And you can see that the zigzag went right off the edge. I just ran it so that the needle was hitting right off the side there. And this is going to keep the fabric from raveling up too much when you wash it. So that's one very easy way to do it. It doesn't require any fancy stitches or any kind of fancy machine. I'm going to show you another easy way to finish. I've got another just little sample. This is again stitched with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this time I have not cut away the extra yet. I'm going to switch back to a straight stitch, and I'm going to stitch about 1/8 inch away from that current seam. It doesn't have to be exactly 1/8 inch. But I did another line of stitching that's pretty close to that first line, but there's definite space between it. I wasn't trying to sew on top of it. Now I'm going to take that back over to the cutting table. So here we are. We've got the seam and then an extra line of stitching. And now I'm just going to cut the edge pretty close to that extra line of stitching with some pinking shears. Just keep working your way down. So now, if you can zoom in, you can see that you've got stitching, stitching, and then a pinked edge. This works best for fabric that doesn't ravel up too much, but what will happen is instead of getting long threads coming off, you'll just get a soft, fuzzy seam. It's very comfortable, and it works well for clothes that aren't super fancy clothes. This works really well for just a plain cotton fabric, everyday kind of clothes. So that's it. Two really easy, fast seam finishes. On the first one, we trimmed the excess away first, and then stitched a zigzag stitch right down that raw edge. And on the second one, we stitched another row of stitching right next to the seam, and then trimmed away the excess with pinking shears. Both of these are not fancy finishes, but they're totally good for every day, and both of them work really well for straight up cotton fabrics. I'm Wendy from shinyhappyworld.com. See you next time.